Have you ever wondered how a tiny group of just 600 men could bring down an empire of millions? It sounds like the plot of a blockbuster movie, but this is the real, incredible story of how the mighty Inca Empire fell. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will change how you see history. In the early 16th century, the Inca Empire was a marvel of the ancient world. Stretching along the Andes Mountains, it was a sprawling civilization with millions of people, advanced engineering, intricate road systems, and a powerful army. They had built cities in the clouds, like the stunning Machu Picchu, and were masters of their domain. From the outside, they seemed invincible. But inside, cracks were beginning to show. The trouble started at the very top. The Inca ruler, Huayna Capac, and his chosen heir suddenly died from a mysterious illness, likely smallpox, which had traveled ahead of the Europeans. This created a massive power vacuum. Two of his sons, Huáscar and Atahualpa, both believed they had the right to the throne. What followed was a brutal and devastating civil war that tore the empire apart. Brother fought against brother, cities were burned, and countless lives were lost. After years of bloody conflict, Atahualpa finally emerged victorious, but the empire he now ruled was weakened, divided, and exhausted. The timing couldn't have been worse, because just as this internal conflict was ending, a new, unforeseen threat was sailing towards their shores. Francisco Pizarro, a Spanish conquistador with immense ambition but had very few resources, landed on the coast of what is now Peru. He had only about 170 soldiers, a handful of horses, and a burning desire for gold and glory. To the Inca, with their armies of tens of thousands, this small band of foreigners must have seemed insignificant, almost laughable. They had no idea what was coming. Pizarro was cunning. He learned about the Civil War and saw an opportunity in the empire's division. He knew he couldn't win in a straight fight. He had to be bold. He had to be deceptive. So, he sent a message to the newly crowned emperor, Atahualpa, inviting him to a peaceful meeting in the city of Cajamarca. Atahualpa, confident in his power and surrounded by his massive army of 80,000 warriors, agreed to the meeting. He saw these strangers as a curiosity, not a threat. He arrived at the meeting place with a procession of several thousand lightly armed attendants, leaving the bulk of his army outside the city square, expecting a diplomatic parley. It was a fatal miscalculation. This was no meeting. It was an ambush. Pizarro had hidden his men, his cannons, and his cavalry all around the square. As Atahualpa entered, a Spanish friar approached him, demanding he convert to Christianity and accept the Spanish king as his sovereign. Atahualpa, confused and insulted, threw the Bible handed to him onto the ground. That was the signal. Suddenly, all hell broke loose. Cannons roared to life, muskets fired, and Spanish soldiers on horseback charged into the terrified, unarmed Inca crowd. The sound of the guns, the sight of men on horses, animals the Inca had never seen before, and the glint of steel armor created absolute chaos and panic. The Inca warriors, trained for ritualized combat, were completely unprepared for this kind of slaughter. In just a couple of hours, thousands of Atahualpa's attendants were killed, while the Spanish suffered almost no casualties. And in the middle of it all, Pizarro himself fought through the chaos to capture the most important prize, the Emperor Atahualpa. With their leader, their living god, now a prisoner, the Inca Empire was paralyzed. The entire structure of their society revolved around the Sapa Inca. Without him, the chain of command was broken. Atahualpa, desperate to win his freedom, made an incredible offer. He promised to fill a large room once with gold and twice with silver in exchange for his release. Pizarro agreed, and for months a river of treasure flowed into Cajamarca from all corners of the empire. It was one of the largest ransoms in history. The Spanish were astounded by the wealth. They melted down priceless works of art into gold and silver bars. But even after the ransom was paid, Pizarro had no intention of letting Atahualpa go. He saw the emperor as too dangerous, a symbol of resistance who could rally his people. So, the Spanish held a mock trial, accused Atahualpa of treason and other crimes, and sentenced him to death. In 1533, the last emperor of the Inca was executed. The heart of the empire had been ripped out. The capture and execution of Atahualpa was the decisive blow, but the conquest wasn't over. The Spanish, now reinforced with more men and led by Pizarro, marched on the Inca capital of Cusco. They exploited the old rivalries from the Civil War, forming alliances with local peoples who had been subjugated by the Inca and were eager to see them fall. The Inca fought back bravely. There were rebellions and fierce battles for years, but they were fighting a losing war. The Spanish had 3 terrifying advantages. First, technology. Their steel swords, armor, and crossbows were far deadlier than the Incas' clubs and cloth armor. Second, horses. Cavalry could break infantry lines and created immense psychological terror. And third, and most devastating of all, disease. Smallpox, measles, and influenza, brought from Europe, swept through the Americas, wiping out up to 90% of the indigenous population. The Inca were dying in vast numbers from invisible enemies they couldn't fight. Their society was collapsing before the Spanish even arrived in their villages. So, how did 600 men destroy an empire of millions? It wasn't just 600 men. It was 600 men who arrived at the perfect moment of internal division. It was 600 men armed with superior military technology and terrifying new tactics. And, most importantly, it was 600 men who were the carriers of deadly diseases that did most of the work for them. They were the spark that ignited a powder keg of civil war, political instability, and demographic collapse. The fall of the Inca is a powerful and tragic lesson in history. It shows how even the mightiest empires can have hidden weaknesses, and how a combination of internal strife, technological disparity, and biological catastrophe can lead to a swift and shocking collapse. A civilization that had thrived for a century was brought to its knees not just by swords and guns, but by timing, deception, and invisible germs. What do you think was the single biggest factor in the Incas' defeat? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories from history. We'll see you in the next video.